So my fantasy that I write, it's not like Harry Potter type stuff. It's not the Twilight type stuff. Well, it is in a sense, but it's more like C.S. Lewis with more of a moral message. There's a little bit more behind it than teenagers going to high school and picking up chicks. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, these like vampires going to high school. You know, for me, a vampire was like Bela Lugosi. You know, he was a Walking Dead. You know, if you've seen the original Dracula from 1933 with Bela Lugosi, Universal Pictures, and to me, that's a vampire. Someone who's walking dead and sucks the blood out of people and turn them into Walking Dead. To me, vampires don't go to high school, you know, or wizards going to like a wizard high school, and nowadays, to me, it seems in American society, it seems there's no more good or bad anymore. You know, the traditional fantasy stories were always the good knight versus, you know, the evil forces. And in the United States nowadays, you don't really have that. You really can't tell the difference, who's good and who's bad, you know. And in the beginning of fantasy writing, even before Tolkien, wizards were always evil. So the second book, you know, in this is going to be a trilogy. This is the first book, but the second book, I'm halfway done now. It should be ready hopefully by Christmas. Is about an evil wizard, and that's kind of my response to the whole Harry Potter series. You know, Harry Potter is good. I just like that whole bad versus evil. To me, I'm very a traditionalist when it comes to writing. So anyway, I was working for TSR, like I said, and working for a company, and you're writing books for them. You write for them, but they tell you what to write. If you're writing something about orcs, they say, well, we want it done this way. We want the story to sound like this. Well, the way you're taking the story in this direction, we don't want it like this. So I was writing, but to me, I felt like they were forcing my hand. I didn't feel like writing for someone else. What I think about is George Lucas. Star Wars, I'm sure you've heard of, right?
Yes.
With George Lucas. He pitched Star Wars for years. No one would take it, and if they looked at it, they said, well, you got to change the characters' names, you got to do this, you got to make this female character into a male, all this. And he says, I don't want to change my story, I want to keep it the way it is. And he said, you know what, I'm going to just create it myself. I'm just going to stick with what with the story I have, and I'm just going to make Star Wars myself. And he made Star Wars on a very low budget, and it was a great success. And now he's a billionaire, right? So for me, this book, The Dragon of Prowley, this is not TSR. It's completely of my own doing. I left TSR and I said, look, I can't work for someone who's constantly not going to allow me to free my creative mind, basically. So everything in this book is strictly from my mind of things I've been wanting to write for years. In regards to screenplays, I've written several screenplays. Really after the movie Gladiator. I don't know if you've seen Gladiator with Russell Crowe or not. But seeing that movie inspired me to write screenplays. I was writing a screenplay every other month and sending it to Hollywood. And after seeing The Passion of Christ, I don't know if you've seen it with Mel Gibson, that inspired me as well. So I wrote a screenplay specifically for Mel Gibson. And the screenplay was about the conquistadors going into Mexico and invading Mexico and converting the Mayan and the Aztecs to Spanish life. So I sent that out to Mel Gibson and didn't hear back from him at all. I figured, well, after The Passion of Christ, the guy's made billions of dollars. I mean, The Passion of the Christ was like Star Wars. He put his own money into it. He put $25 million into it, and it made like $500 million in the States alone. And that was all his money coming in. So I'm sure he probably didn't even bother looking at my screenplay. Who knows? Who knows? But I wrote him a letter saying, look, I loved your work. The Passion of the Christ, and you have this movie that was just coming out, Apocalypto. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's about the Mayan culture in Mexico. So I sent them the screenplay. I said, I'm giving you the screenplay for free. You can have it. You don't have to put my name on anything. You can just take it, use it. You don't even have to give me credit. I just think your directing's fantastic, but I'm just going to give it to you, okay? Which a lot of people don't do, okay? So I haven't never heard back from them. But recently, a couple months ago, I heard through the grapevine, you know, in Hollywood, that Mel Gibson's making a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. Very similar to my story, but it's Vikings invading England. So instead of conquistadors invading Mexico, it's Vikings invading England. So I'm looking forward to the film, and I'm hoping that he took some of my ideas, if he even looked at it. Because in Hollywood, it has to go through many people before, you know, someone like Mel Gibson sees it. It has to go through his agent, you know, then it has to go through, you know, another agent, and then they have to look at it and say, I don't know, should we bother Mel Gibson with this? I mean, come on, look at this guy. So, you know, I'm hoping that he looked at it and maybe got some ideas from it. So anyways, about my book, it's doing very well in the States, doing very well in Australia, New Zealand. It was a hard book to write. It took me a couple of years to write it. I hired an illustrator in New York, and 5 months into it, the illustrator got in trouble for embezzlement. So, you know, taking money and shifting it around. And I said, well, I can't have an embezzler doing an illustrator for my cover, because if word gets out, forget it. I'll never get a job. I'll never get a publisher to take the book. So I found an illustrator who lives in Belgium, and she's actually was born in Russia, and she did the cover. And the book is targeted between the ages of 9 and 15. So it's targeting that Harry Potter, you know, age group. And so with hardly any time, you know, to get this cover done, she did it, and it was fantastic. And everyone in the States is happy with it. My father, he lives in a retirement home, and there's a lot of Russians that live in the retirement home over in the States in California. And they all looked at the cover and they said, oh, it looks very European, you know, kind of, you know, it looks very like a Russian dragon. I said, well, maybe, while the illustrator was drawing it, maybe it has some Russian, European influence in it. So people seem to like the cover. And her name is Maria Andrade, and she's a fantastic artist. And believe it or not, with today's technology, I've never met her. You know, it's just a lot of emails and back and forths. But hopefully someday I will. I'll meet her. So yeah, the book's doing very well, and you can get it like Amazon.com from, you know, Japan, Germany. I don't know about Russia. China, they said no, absolutely not. When the publisher tried to get the book sold in China, China said no, we're not. We don't want it. So, and the reason for that is because C.S. Lewis was someone I admired. There are some you know, religious aspects to it, and and its Christian aspect. So I don't think the Chinese government wanted to deal with that. You know, so what can you do? You can't, you know, you can't write a book and hope that everyone's pleased by it. You just hope that you write it and people who are into the genre will enjoy it. That's what I hope for. I hope that, you know, parents go out and they see the book, oh, the dragon, you know, prowling, and they'll pick it up, and for the kids, and that the kids enjoy it. That's mainly, you know, that's what I'll be happy about. If someone comes up to me and says, oh, my kid enjoyed it. Well, if one kid enjoyed it, mission accomplished, right? And you know, and it would make me happy. Now, the second book I'm working on, it's called The Wizard of Prowley, and it's going to be a trilogy. It's going to be the Prowley trilogy once all 3 books are done. And Prowley is a small Italian village near the French border, near the Appalachians. Not many people have heard of it. So I'm hoping, with the book out there, people go, where is this place? And Google it, and they'll go, wow, now it's a great ski resort. Maybe we'll go. And I'm going to send a copy to the mayor as well. So maybe after I send a copy, maybe I'll get an invite, because I've never been to Italy. So I would just love to go. I hear it's an amazing place. So, yeah. So let me ask you a quick question. Any of you into the fantasy genre? Any of you read any fantasy books at all?
Me.
Oh yeah. What do you read?
Well, I read a lot of fantasy, like Roger Lasny, Tolkien, that you mentioned, and many other authors, some Russian authors too. I can't really name any right now off my head, but I'm a big fan of fantasy genre.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something about me in fantasy. Tolkien was someone I always admired. Even at age 5, one of the first books I read was The Hobbit. I don't know how many of you have read The Hobbit, but it's the greatest book I've ever read. I mean, I read it when I was 5, and from time to time, I'll still pick it up and I'll still read it, And I tell my friends this: if there was no such thing as a Bible, The Hobbit would be my Bible. It's a fantastic book. And I know Tolkien isn't really big in Russia, as far as I understand. I know that once the Lord of the Rings movies came out, then he became, somewhat big. But in the Western world, in England, of course, because he's English, and in the United States, he's like a god, basically. And for a guy like me, if Tolkien was alive today, I'd be like, wow, just to meet him, because he was a fantastic mind. And something that, he lived in the 50s. He wrote Lord of the Rings, which is a big trilogy. He wrote that in 1954. So, he wasn't able to see these movies that were created, because, he passed away. And same with C.S. Lewis when the Narnia movies came out. If they only knew that people later on would make these movies, about their books. And the writers in those days, they were academics. Tolkien was a professor, and I believe C.S. Lewis was as well. Very bright guys. If you look at a lot of their pictures, they're standing there with a smoking jacket and a pipe. They look extremely intelligent. Fantasy writers today, most of them come from small universities. They're really relaxed. They're not dressed in 3-piece suits. They have that, I guess I can say, California lifestyle about them. They're just very relaxed. They're free thinkers, and they just say what's on their mind. And a lot of times it gets us in trouble because we say things and put our foot in our mouth a lot of times, and someone will say, well, that was kind of rude. It's like, oh, what did I just say? But that's how Californians are. And we just continue to talk. So if I talk too fast, let me know, because I just ramble on. So writers today, they're a little bit more laid back. J.K. Rowling, the woman who wrote the Harry Potter series, hers is an amazing story because she was homeless. She was living on the street, and she was writing Harry Potter on napkins, in alleys. And a publisher picked it up and it exploded, and she owns a castle in England. So if you want to become a writer, the main thing is, if you have a story, put it down on paper, okay? And just get it out there. Send it to publishers. Try to sell it. If it's a good story, it'll get published, especially in fantasy. Fantasy, since the Lord of the Rings movies, I would say, I'm a little biased, but the #1 genre right now. I mean, if you look at Hollywood films today, fantasy movies are it. In the States, Lightning Thief just came out, and that's a book series, and it's a fantasy series. So for the last 10 years, fantasy's been just the #1 money-making genre for Hollywood, so they're picking up these books and making them into movies. Now, I had an opportunity while I was writing this. I had DreamWorks approach me. I don't know, has anyone heard of DreamWorks at all? They've done a lot of Disney stuff, animated stuff. And they approached me and they said, no, we hear you got a dragon book coming out. I said, yeah, you know, it's pretty good. This is going all right. I'm halfway through it at this point, you know, chapter 6. And they're all, well, come on into our office. We want to talk to you. Well, DreamWorks, are you kidding me? I was there in an hour. I was doing 100 miles an hour on the freeway. I mean, you know, when DreamWorks calls, I don't care what you're doing. You stop what you're doing and you just go. And that's what I did. And I rushed in the office and they go, oh, wow, pretty fast. You made it here in an hour. And so we talked, and they wanted to see my book before it was published, for, the 6 chapters that I already had. Now, we'll send everything that you have written to us. We want to look at it. And then we'll talk about, you know, making into a movie, animated series, you know, something like that. But it was animated because DreamWorks does animation. And I said, well, I want to do live action, like Harry Potter, you know, or Lord of the Rings. I go, yeah, but it's a dragon thing. You know, dragon movies don't sell in live action. They sell in animated form. Dragonheart, which was a movie that came out about 15 years ago with Sean Connery and Dennis Quaid. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but Sean Connery played the voice of the dragon, and it just didn't do very well. And the sequel didn't even play in the theaters. It was direct to DVD. And I said, well, yeah, I kind of want a live action. They go, well, if you do live action, and it's a flop, no one's ever going to come to you and ask you for another one of your stories to be brought into a book form and put onto a screenplay and then put on film. So I said, well, okay, we can talk animation. They said, well, we want to read it all. And at this time, I was still writing it. And I wanted it published first. I wanted it copyrighted first. But to have it copyrighted in the whole 9 yards and have the story, the characters protected before I give it to them. Because in Hollywood, what they do and what they like to do is they get some guy who isn't used to the California, Hollywood, LA style business, and they say, oh, let's see your stuff. Oh, great, Hollywood, I'm going to give them all my stuff. And they give them the story. And they look at the story, wow, this is great, let's make these changes. Oh, well, it's not protected, it's not copyrighted. Call the guy up, the writer. Well, we're not interested in your story. You know, it's missing some stuff. We don't want it. 2 years later, he sees his story with a different title, different names of the character on film. They completely stole his story. So when DreamWorks came to me, I told them, well, you know, yeah, you guys are pretty big, but I'm not going to do what everyone else does. I'm going to go ahead and wait. I'm going to wait till it's completely finished. I'm going to get it copyrighted, because what's in the book, I'm a little biased, and Marina tells me, you know, I have some American arrogance about me, that I think in my books there's some things that are completely fantastic in it. So I didn't want to give it to them, and I told them, oh, I'm sorry, DreamWorks, but I'm not going to give it to you. You're just going to have to wait till it's done. And they're like, well, we don't really want to wait. I said, well, that's just too bad. I'm just going to have to wait. I'm sorry. And they said, okay, fine. So about a month ago, I was looking at previews because I'm into movies, you know, writing screenplays. You know, I'm heavily into movies, especially coming from California. And I saw a preview for an animated dragon movie from some woman who wrote some books on dragons. I don't even know the author's name. It was a small book. And so I said, this is interesting. And then it said, oh, from DreamWorks. So I said, oh, well, you know, they probably pitched someone else for the dragons. They were probably pitching a bunch of people out there for dragon stories, found the one they liked, and put it on film. Well, for me, it kind of hurts because I probably won't get that opportunity again. Because now if I go to them with this book and say, oh, you know, it's copyrighted, they'll say, you had your chance. We gave it to you. You know, now we got another dragon movie. So just kick me right out the door. But that's what they do. And this movie, the dragon movie that DreamWorks is doing, is coming out in the States March 28th. I don't even know the full title, really. It's something on how to train your dragon. It's an animated kids movie. But they've already used some ideas from this book here and implemented into this new movie coming out. Like in my book, and even in the previous books, when I worked for TSR, when I'm discussing the history of dragons, I created my own history of dragons. You know, I felt that it was important because there's always this generic idea of how dragons came to be, you know, and how they were extinguished. Well, for me, in this book, I wrote about the history of dragons that the dinosaurs came first, and then later dragons came. And the dragons ended up being more powerful than the dinosaurs, and that's what made the dinosaurs extinct. It wasn't some meteor from outer space and, you know, blocking out the sun with ash. It was actually dragons that killed all the pterodactyls and all the dinosaurs, and that I called the dragons fire breathers. Well, they took that and used it in this movie. And, you know, I was calling dragons fire breathers long before this book with TSR, and I don't know of any author who looked at dragons and, yeah, they breathe fire, but they never consider them a race of fire breathers. It wasn't like they breathe fire, but they were never called fire breathers, they were just called dragons. And I explained in this story how later on, when humans developed, humans became the main force on Earth, and it was the humans that started killing off the dragons. And dragon hunters and hunting down the dragons, killing the dragons and destroying the eggs, and that's how the dragons became extinct. And that it was the humans that labeled dragons dragons. And I explained how the name dragon came from the Latin form and the French form, and then it transformed to the English dragon. So it's very interesting if you read the history of just the word dragon. And I explain that in the book. To me, I've always loved dragons, so this was a good opportunity to write a book where the main bad guy is a dragon. In the past, you would have bad guys who had dragons, but they would just ride dragons. You know what I mean? It wasn't that the dragon was the complete force against man, and this is what this book is about. I wrote it for the fact that I look at the world today, and I kind of see the world going in the wrong direction. You know, I'm not saying the whole, but let's just say the United States, because that's who I can talk about. That's where I'm from. I see the United States pretty much going in the wrong direction. America, in my opinion, in the last 20, 30 years is gone in the wrong direction. It reminds me of, you know, when they say, you know, never let history repeat itself. Learn from history and don't let it repeat itself. Well, I believe America is not paying attention to history because I see them going in the way of the Roman Empire. You know, America started off very Christian. Christians basically started the United States, and now the United States is at this place of utopia, you know. Believe it or not, you know, I know people here in Russia, and some of the things in Russia I cannot fathom. You know, waiting in bread lines, you know, during the communist era, 6 hours for bread and things like this. And, you know, I came from a country where my entire life I could walk 2 blocks down the road and get whatever I wanted. Anything, you know, that simple. Walk into a grocery store and you're looking for peanut butter, and there's 20 versions of peanut butter, you know. I mean, and it's like that with every product. 20 different types of breads, you know. And so I think at this point America's kind of at the height, and they're going into that direction of, they're becoming really immoral. They're like the Romans, they delved into a lot of promiscuous behaviors, and they were drinking and getting drunk, and and going off and warring the Germans at the time, taking over lands and all this, and I feel that's where America is going now. It's just going in the wrong direction. And what happens to a country when it goes in the wrong direction? It goes downhill, and boom, it's done. And with technology today, the decline is faster. I mean, the United States has been around for what, a little over 200 years. But I see the decline. And the dragon in this book is representative of that. It's representative of evil in the world. Evil that Americans do, the evil of terrorism. The dragon represents all of that. In a couple of the chapters, the dragon completely goes and wipes out entire villages. It grabs running teenage girls, grabs them, eats them, crushes them. He does what dragons do. And there's this one village that just went up in smoke, fire, ash. And for me, that was a little personal, because that was in the book, the dragon being the two planes that hit the towers of the World Trade Center and completely wiping out the village. And I wrote the description as it was on 9/11. For me, and for all Americans, 9/11 was, well, it was my Pearl Harbor. Before 9/11, I'd wake up,